Welcome to Rock School Proprietor Podcast. Just a quick heads up before we get started. We had some minor audio issues with this episode and we did our best to clean them up. Hopefully it's not too bad. On today's episode of Rock School Proprietor Podcast, we're talking about burnout. Burnout running your music school. How it happens and how to overcome it. When you are passionate about something, you want to talk about it. You want to think about it. You want to do better work. But burnout's going to exist. It's more about trying to figure out how do you turn that off.
And as business owners, we're not just working in the arts, we're business owners in the arts, right?
We are part of this lucky few that have found our purpose, because not everyone can say that. That's kind of what life's about. Welcome to the Rock School Proprietor Podcast. I'm John Kazicki, and my
Mandy
co-host, Mandy. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, John?
I'm good. We're going to talk about burnout today.
Yeah.
How it happens, how to overcome it. I've got thoughts on why I think people like us who work in the arts, music instructors, people who run music studios, are more susceptible to burnout than, say, your hourly time clock puncher, maybe someone who, delivers packages for a living or works we've got a lot of auto factories here in Michigan, maybe someone who works in an auto factory. I think I've got reasons why we might be more susceptible to it. But I thought I'd start with a story about myself. And I think there's some burnout aspects of this story, but it'll all come together. So I used to work in public relations, and I was a publicist. I was a writer. I worked in an office. And at the time, it was like my clients were fun. We got to do fun events. The office was relatively small. I liked the people that I worked with. I will say that my boss at the time, she was going through some kind of tumultuous stuff in her personal life that flowed over. But I wouldn't say I felt fulfilled in my job. And I'd been working there a couple of years, and I remember driving to work one Monday morning, and I just decided I'm going to quit. And that day, I got to work and I put in my notice. I was like,
whoa.
I know. Yeah.
Whoa. All right.
And I didn't even give I only gave 1 week notice. I didn't even give 2 weeks. I was just talk to my boss. Yeah, this is it.
Hey, were you married at the time?
No.
Okay.
No, but that's a good question because that comes into play. No, I just knew working in the office, it just wasn't, and that 9 to 5 grind,
Mm-hmm.
it wore me down. And maybe that's the burnout aspect of it. But yeah, I walked in and I was like, I talked to my boss. I was like, you know what? This isn't for me. This is going to be my last week.
Mm-hmm.
And so put in a notice, worked the rest of the week, and I felt great. I felt so good that I was just freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there was this reality that set in. And you asked if I was married at the time. I wasn't, but I was engaged. Okay. So, we were planning a wedding, and that reality set in that I just quit a job and I don't have another one. And I needed a source of income, right? So it was that high that I felt from quitting lasted for a couple of weeks. And then I was like, oh no, I didn't plan this out. I didn't even think about what I was going to do after this. And ultimately that's how I found teaching. I was able to get a friend of mine said, well, why don't you teach guitar? And I'd never done it before, but I was like, I guess and I was able to get a job teaching guitar really quickly. And I didn't go into it thinking oh, this is what I'm going to do. But I went into it thinking I need to make some money,
Yeah,
this wedding
perfect
plan.
temporary situation.
Yeah. And like ultimately, I ended up getting another office job. Then I went to work for a nonprofit organization as a development director. And they happened to be like one of my clients previously when I was working in the public relations office. And I thought, this is a good move because in my mind, I thought like, well, I didn't feel like I had a real purpose in in my job as a publicist. And I thought, oh, nonprofit, right? People do these jobs. People get involved with nonprofits because they feel good about what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And like I got into that job and I felt like, I'm sort of feeling a lot of the same stuff that I felt in
This,
my last job, right? Still working in an office, still kind of feeling those same feelings. But I was like, well, I'm supposed to feel connected to this purpose. I'm supposed to feel better about it. And I didn't. So that didn't last either. And, I ended up only working at that job for about a year and different circumstances came up. I ended up moving out of state. But in hindsight, I was able to look back and think, okay, there's something here. I don't know how to unpackage it, but both these jobs that I had working in offices, like I had them for different reasons, but I still felt the same problems. I still felt like the same issues with these jobs. So, I realized like the office life was kind of what was getting to me about it. So yeah, and I think where this goes is this idea of, I mean, in my mind, I thought like having a more meaningful job, right, which was the mission of this nonprofit, I thought that would bring happiness.
mm-hmm.
And it didn't. It didn't,
Yeah.
right? So, and I think this is where we kind of transition into the discussion about burnout, because I think a lot of people fall for this idea that when you have purpose, it automatically results in happiness.
Mm.
Well, and you had mentioned to me that you worked in a nonprofit also.
Yeah. Yes. And this is so funny. I haven't heard your story before. I loved that. I was kind of the opposite of what you were. So I worked for a nonprofit arts organization and we did 3 major productions a year. Everyone was part-time, right? This is an arts organization. We didn't have a ton of money. The executive director was full-time, but everyone else was part-time, right? Trying to sustain this organization. I worked in development also, John, but marketing, production manager, our accountant, all part-time. But I loved it. I was passionate about it, right? So none of us had enough time to get our jobs done. We were, underpaid. And then there was the ebb and flow of the year. Hours weren't normal. Sometimes we're working in the evenings, depending on rehearsal schedules and whatever else, if there's galas happening or whatever else was going on, right? Fundraising events. But I loved it. Then I had my oldest I had my first daughter when I was working there. And that's when it was harder because the lines were too blurred for me. Like there was a lot of stress over this job, not having enough time, the stress of always trying to, fundraise and grant write to keep the organization alive. And I was working at home sometimes. It was just too much. It was too like the burnout was real for everybody in that organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went the opposite direction. I quit that job and I got a 9 to 5 in a small sales company, right? It
Yeah.
was an executive search firm. And it was a small group, but it was in the city, cool people. I loved everybody. And I would essentially clock in, clock out. There were some nice
Yeah.
happy hours sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the group, but I went home and I was done, right? And I I enjoyed that. That helped me maintain some balance as like a new mom and I just kind of relieved the burnout. But when I moved, they sent a desk with me. They're like, you can stay on, just work remotely. They sent a desk. I moved away and I was like, this is not fun anymore.
Mm,
I was never passionate about the work I was doing, but
yeah.
it was a, people were cool, the city was cool, and now I'm gone and I'm by myself. I'm like, yep, I got to move on and do something else.
Hmm.
And that's when I went off on my own and started the studio.
So the moral of all these stories is that it doesn't like burnout happens
Everywhere.
regardless of your job.
Yep.
And I kind of pre-sold the idea of like the 9 to 5 or the hourly or whatever. I think the big difference in that respect, like if you're delivering packages for Amazon or something, yes, you clock in, you clock out, you don't have a connection to the job
Hmm.
in a deep way, right? It's like, well, this is my job. This
Yep.
is what I do. There's that clear delineation between your job and then everything else in your personal life.
Mhm.
Now, us as music studio owners, as music instructors, those lines, as you mentioned when you were working in the nonprofit, those lines get blurred. You're very passionate about what you're doing. And so you feel so connected to the work that you have a hard time turning it off. You have a hard time seeing that delineation between like what you're working on and like your personal life because it's all intermeshed, right? And pair that with the idea of like music and arts. The whole purpose is like passion in your work, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
when you are passionate about something, you want to talk about it. You want to think about it. You want to do better work. You want to
Hmm.
do all these things. But burnout's going to exist
Yes.
everywhere, right? It's like,
Hmm.
it's more about trying to figure out how do you turn that off
Yes.
so that you don't burn out, I think.
Right.
Um, and that's why I think working in the arts, we are more susceptible to it
Yes.
because we have a hard time like not thinking about it. We love it.
Mhm. We love it. Yep. And it's, you talked about turning it off. I think it's about finding balance, right? Just finding a way to balance things out. And as business owners, we're not just working in the arts, we're business owners in the arts, right? So the
Yeah.
burnout is real because we are teaching. So we're still
Double
doing the
dose.
job. We're
Yeah, double
teaching.
dose of those prospective issues that are going to come up, right?
Oh
Burnout from
yeah.
passion, burnout from like the tasks.
The tasks. We're managing teachers, we're managing finances, we're managing facilities, which includes cleaning. Like we're doing
Yeah,
all these different jobs. We're
right.
marketing, advertising,
Yeah.
customer service, like all of the things. I think I've said it before. Like it all comes down to you, all these
Hmm.
pieces of the business and the puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that said, because that paints a little bit of a bleak picture. It's like, oh my gosh, we've got all this stuff to do, and then in this other category, we've got all this stuff to do, and like,
Hmm.
yeah, how do we separate it? But I think it's really important to sort of, I suppose, like put it in front of our minds that we are part of this lucky few that have found our purpose,
Yes.
because not everyone can say that, and
Hmm.
that's, I mean, like that's kind of what life's about, right? Like everyone's
Yeah.
trying to find their thing. Everyone's trying to find, and like some people work the 9 to 5 and then they find their thing in their off time.
You're right.
That's great too, but
Yeah.
we are the lucky few that have figured out how to make our passion also our means of income, make it our living. That's that's pretty exceptional. And I think it's important to protect. And that's why this conversation is so important because again, it's so easy to like find yourself in the thick of that burnout and then do what I did. Like, oh, I'm going to quit today. Like I'm going to quit. And then all these problems go away. And it doesn't really work that way.
No, you just get a new
Yeah.
set of problems.
It works for, in my experience, you feel good for 2 weeks and then the reality sets in.
Yeah.
So exactly, you get a new set of
Yes.
problems, whether that's back in the 9 to 5 world or like working for someone else, there's always going to be bad days.
Hmm. Oh,
Always. And
yeah.
it doesn't matter what your profession is, everyone has the bad days.
Yep. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yeah. Do you daydream a little bit sometimes when you're in the middle of a burnout? Like, oh, what if I was just
I'm a
making
constant
coffee?
daydreamer. I'm like that's like I feel like that's a strength though,
Yes.
that's like daydreaming is what where my ideas come from, and then I put together plans to like make things cooler and better all the time. But you're saying the opposite. You
Yes.
ever daydream about like
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
if we're talking about burnout, when you're in the middle of like
Hmm.
of that burnout and you're talking to your favorite barista, getting your coffee, you're like, oh,
Right.
what if I just went in and made coffee and then went home?
Yeah.
But
My
that's
sorry,
the
go
point.
ahead.
It's just a whole different set of problems. And then you're not, then I don't want to be removed from this place that I'm at where I am, passionate and have found my purpose. So,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
This isn't a me story, but my wife is a veterinarian, and another profession where people get involved in that because they're passionate about or compassionate.
Yeah.
They're passionate about like helping animals and like the whole career, all the people involved. She has those days, and she daydreams about being a florist.
Yeah, there you
It's
go.
just like,
Exactly.
oh, you just be a florist and work in a flower shop. But yeah, again, the
But
reality
ultimately
sets in.
that's not what she
Yeah,
wants and needs. Hmm.
different set of problems, different set of problems.
Totally.
So weathering the storm, like when you're in it.
Mhm.
I mean, I've got a few bullet points that I think are probably universal, and then I've got some like personal stuff that I'll share that I like to do in those instances.
Yeah.
But I think counting wins and losses, that's kind of like a gratitude practice, right? And when you're in the thick of it, when you're feeling the burnout, it's so easy to count the losses, right?
Hmm.
I got to do this task and I got to do this task and I hate these tasks. I got to do these other tasks and I hate all those tasks. We sort of fixate on those losses.
It's
I
easy to
think
do.
I think it's equally important, and it doesn't always work when you're in the thick of it, but like I think it's equally important on a regular basis to think about your wins, think about the positives that are associated with your job. I think about our concerts that we do, and the like how happy the students are, like the families that come, and like the enjoyment that they get out of that. Think about how like this is sort of like what I always envisioned 15 years ago. I literally have created it. That's a huge win. So I try and remind myself of those things on a regular basis, so that when I do get in those ruts, it's easier to recall them rather than focus on the negatives.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think taking a step back and examining, you know, where you are, what's going on around you. Some of my favorite like circumstances to think about are like the kids that, well, really parents, the parents that kind of wanted to give up, but you work with every week to be like, no, you hang in here. We've got this. Because you're almost helping them in my circumstances, in my case, I'm almost helping them through some parenting, difficulties, right? Like
Oh yeah.
Joey just doesn't want to be in here. Joey is just too rambunctious. Joey just, whatever it is. And those parents that are willing to work with you and take little steps every week and to see how far they've come. Like I think about those are some of the situations that I feel best about. I try to think about those, right? Or I I always keep like a card on my desk. If you ever get a really nice card from a
Oh
client,
yeah. Hmm.
keep it on your desk,
Hmm.
as a reminder of
I
like
have,
why you do
yeah,
what you do.
I have photos of myself with students.
Yeah.
I, I've, it's hard to see where I'm video right now, but in
Hmm.
behind me, that there's a framed photo of me with the very first student that ever started with me at my very first music school.
That
Yeah.
is awesome.
She's
Yep.
she's like she's married now and in her 20s, but like she was like 8 or 9 years old at the time of that photo. As just a reminder of this is how far you've come. This was number one. This was student one when you started your first music school.
Yeah.
Okay. Resilience. I want to talk about resilience. And this is an important one because where we are did not come from all the positive things that happened. Resilience comes from those bad days.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, it's the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? But
Right.
when we are in those ruts, when we are feeling burnout, coming out the other side, that's where our resilience comes from. And every time we experience it, we're stronger. Every time we hit one of these walls, we have choices. We can ignore it
Hmm.
and hope it goes away, or we can look at it as an opportunity to say, all right, it's not going to go away. I've got to fix this problem. How am I going to fix this problem? Because when it happens again, I'll be better equipped to deal with it and I won't feel so burnt out.
Hmm. Yeah. This we learn from our mistakes or from these difficult situations for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tackling it head on. Yeah.
Remembering our why. This is, I mean, very similar to what we were just talking about like, I've got the photos, you've got the thank you cards, remembering why you do this. And anyone listening who needs to kind of hone in on that, maybe go back and listen to our episode about finding your why and how to express that and apply it. But again, that's super important. That's your purpose, right? That's like what you feel strongly enough about to pursue this this business or your teaching or whatever it is.
Absolutely. That is a really important one that will help me get through burnout. Taking a step back, remembering the why.
It goes
Or
hand in
actually,
hand with gratitude, I think. But yeah,
yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And actually, like sometimes actually taking a break, whatever that is, if that's half a day or if that's calling in a sub for, classes, like whatever that
Mm-hmm.
looks like, your break looks like half an hour, full day, taking a break and coming back sometimes
Yes.
refreshes that why for me, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's in fact that's one of my tactics is
Yeah.
that I'll get to.
Okay.
The last bullet point I have for weathering the storm, and by no means is this a like complete list. There's tons, but I think these are some good ones. Getting out of our own heads.
Hmm.
And again, this kind of goes back to when we're feeling it, it's so easy to focus on the losses. It's so easy to focus on the negatives that we're dealing with. Getting out of our heads and talk it out, vent with someone, talk with a friend, talk with another music instructor, another lesson studio owner, because I think getting it out of our heads allows us to then have a clearer mind for either dealing with the problems or being able to refocus on the positive aspects of our jobs.
Hmm. Absolutely. I have a pretty strong network of teachers and directors that teach the Music Together curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great place to go. And they're always going to lift you up, right? If you need
Yeah.
to, get it out there. And I'm lucky enough to have a pretty great admin at my studio that is, she's smart, she's awesome. And if I can vent a little bit to her,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a great person to say, like, well, maybe we should do this, or, but you've got to remember, you know, this is how she'll start those sentences. Like, you've got to remember, like, this is really good right now. Or, you know, same thing. Just a great
Yeah.
person to to talk through things with.
Right. And when you have those folks, when you have contemporaries that work in the same space as you, chances are pretty good that they're going to have experienced these things in the past as well.
Yeah.
So they can, first commiserate and they can empathize, but they also might have suggestions on how to overcome. And again, sometimes we just need someone to tell us what to do, right? When you
Yeah.
feel like when you're in the thick of it and you just sort of feel like, what am I going to do? I don't like doing this. I don't like doing that. If someone just says, hey, do this and then do this and you'll be done. That gives us easy steps that we can follow. And then that goes with a lot of things. Sometimes we just need to figure out, well, what is that first step to take to like overcome whatever obstacle we're in?
Yeah.
Okay. So practical tactics that have worked for you. I know you had mentioned to me earlier something about collaborating when you feel burnt out.
Yeah. Which might feel like taking on more, more work, but it's inspiring to me and it's refreshing to me to kind of collaborate. And you mentioned, reaching out to colleagues and having them just tell you what to do, right? Do this, do that, right?
Yeah.
That's always great. I've had colleagues reach out too that will say like, don't do that. Like, stop doing that. That's also
Yeah.
really helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's almost like we need permission. Like, I have to do all these things. I need to. But reaching out, expressing your burnout and having someone say, don't do that. You don't need to do that. Stop that. Do more of this. Right.
Right.
And kind of for me, it's the collaboration piece. It's refreshing. I like working in our area schools. It's refreshing to go into a new space and new faces and get the excitement from teachers and new kids. Working with a senior center, a local senior center, I like to do that and go in.
So you're recentering on your why when you do that, I think.
Yeah.
Right? There's no, I mean, you're volunteering. You're taking like what you are good at and you're offering it to others.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just expanding that reach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bringing more into the fold. I also like to kind of workshop or collaborate with my teachers. That's refreshing to me. Hey guys, let's get together and share ideas. Right? That's awesome. Whether it's just within my center or, there's a few in the Southeast Michigan area that I can collaborate with.
That idea, if I can elaborate on it, that in my mind is when you're kind of teaming up and working on new ideas, that's evolving what you do, right? That's taking that's putting new life into something that might feel a little bit stale and stagnant. And it's almost like a new project, right? We always get excited about new projects. So that's a great one.
Yes, I really love doing that. And I work with my team more regularly over the last couple of years than when I did in the beginning. Well, my team was smaller in the beginning, but it's great to have teachers to bounce ideas off and breathe new life into what you're doing. It feels like, yes, you're just getting better and better every time you have that kind of that workshop and collaborating with your employees, your peers too. I also like to just observe, like take a break from what I'm doing. In my world, in my early childhood world, I'll go observe like an elementary teacher I know in the area, or I'll travel a bit and go observe other music together teachers just to kind of like get on the other side of the classroom and observe and learn. It feels like a break. It feels fun. It feels fun being on the other side, right? So it's a couple of ways that I would consider collaborating and observing.
Okay. I have two that I will regularly use when I'm feeling like just down, burnt out in the thick of it. Number one is I offer to help other people.
Mhm.
When I'm just like, and I think part of this, I'll preface this by saying like, this could be a potential trap for the wrong person because in part of it, it's avoidance, right? I'm maybe like avoiding some of these things that I don't want to do,
Mhm.
but I have a purpose and it almost always works for me. So I also have a network of other music school owners that I will just reach out to and say, hey, who needs help with anything right now? I'm here to help. If anyone's got a problem that they're working on and they need some help, let me know. I'm happy to offer any suggestions or offer my help. The reason I do it is almost every time what I find is that I'm no longer focused on my problem. I'm focused on someone else's problem. And in focusing on someone else's problem, I'm removed from all the like personal baggage.
Mhm.
It helps me to kind of reframe like my mindset and realize like, oh, my problem is really still tied to my personal baggage, right? And then like in helping someone else, I have a better frame of mind to accomplish whatever I need to do and help myself.
Yeah.
So
That is awesome. I think that's so great. It's really counterintuitive to me. Like I would have a hard time doing that, but it makes me appreciate you a lot more. I think that's very cool. I think it's very cool that that's how you approach it.
well, I'll say, I mean, like you sort of do something similar. You said you'll go and and do a class at a senior center or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, that is like you're volunteering your service. You're volunteering what you do.
Yes.
Again, I think it like it changes your mindset.
Mhm.
And most of this stuff is all about what we're thinking.
Mhm.
And overcoming our negative thoughts is like this ongoing thing. So yeah, helping others. I will
Cool.
offer to help anyone who needs help. Number two, and this is a big one. I even do this for small problems, not even when I'm burnt out, but just like when I start to feel like, oh, I need a break. I step away. I step away for a few minutes. Sometimes it's just take like a quick 5 minute walk, right?
Mhm.
And get my body moving so that like when my body moves, I feel like less focused on the stagnation of like my negative thoughts.
Mhm.
It just changes my outlook. Or I'll play music.
Mhm.
And I think this is like I'm super grateful that I'm able to do this when I get stuck, when I'm like sitting at the computer trying to figure out all these problems and solve issues. I remember doing this during COVID a lot, which I would just play drums for 10 minutes, just
Mhm.
completely check out from whatever I'm doing, put on some headphones, play along to some music. I think that's very similar to the like just getting active thing, at least the drums for me, because it's more of a physical thing
Mhm.
than other instruments. So yeah, I feel lucky that I can do that. I can just take a break and play music.
Yes. Yeah. I I do the same thing. Like this, I mean, singing. I'll sing, right? We are lucky that that's something that is more natural for us to go to. I wish it was more natural for other people, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people know if you take a break and take a walk, get your body moving, that's good for stress levels, right? But I think even more so, like making music, the chemical reactions that happen in your brain
Yeah.
and what happens there it's one of the best things you can do. Yep.
Definitely not something I
Mhm.
could have done working in the office.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I think what I want to do is this is all going to be in our show notes.
Mhm.
I mean, it's one thing to listen to it, but I think having it as a resource, if anyone who is listening to this needs to go back and you know lift our ideas or utilize some of our suggestions, All of these will be in the show notes at rockschoolproprietor.com. Burnout's hard.
Yep.
To kind of put a pin in this one and wrap it up. Again, we're working in the arts. We're passionate people. Compassion fatigue, that's a real thing.
Yep.
And we're all going to experience it. But it's important, again, for us to realize that it's going to happen whether we're working a 9 to 5 or the job that we work. So
yes, absolutely. And you're not alone. Definitely not alone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap it up for this episode of Rock School Proprietor Podcast. Great suggestions, Mandy. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was great.
All right. We'll see you next time. I had some additional thoughts that I wanted to share after the conversation with Mandy. When you set out to tackle the tasks or solve the problems that triggered those feelings of burnout, are you simply addressing that specific problem or working on fixing the breakdown in the system that caused the problem in the first place? So this doesn't apply to everything, but oftentimes these things that come up that annoy us, that we feel are pulling our attention away from our actual work, they can be recurring problems. Obviously, this won't always be the case, but it's certainly worth asking yourself, have I been in this situation before because of the same set of circumstances? If you find yourself experiencing the same negative feelings resulting from the same or very similar problems, it might be that whatever system you have in place could be triggering the issue. And if that's the case, then you're likely doomed to find yourself in a similar situation in the future. While it might seem bigger and more daunting, your future self will thank you for fixing, updating, or modifying your process so that you're less likely to find yourself in the same place down the road. If you have topic suggestions or questions, or maybe you've got a strategy you used when you're dealing with burnout and you want to share it, please let us know. info@rockschoolproprietor.com is where you can contact us. We'd love to hear from you. Show notes and transcripts for this and all episodes are at rockschoolproprietor.com. I'm at Rock School Proprietor on Instagram if you'd like to connect with me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn as John Kazicki. If you enjoyed this show and gained insight from our conversation, then we count that as a win. All we ask in return is that you pay it forward and share the show with someone you think needs to hear it. When you can, we hope you apply what you hear on the show, and we'll see you next time on Rock School Proprietor Podcast.